Hello. Hi. Hello, my dear students. How are you today? So, I am glad that you are here to listen. Are you ready? Let's have fun while we are learning. So, for today's lesson, we are going to talk about parts of the flower. Alright, so let's get started. For this part, you are going to have an activity. You are going to guess what the picture is and arrange the letter to make the word. Are you ready? So when you hear this sound, it means time's up. Again, this sound means time's up. There you go. Let's begin the first one. Number one. Ta-da! So what is your answer? Yes, your answer is seed. Correct. This is the avocado seed. There you go. Let me give you this one. Well done. Let's go to the next part. Now, what do you think is this word? All right, so everybody, let's try to answer this. Ta-da! There, it's a flower, a beautiful flower. How about this one? There. And the answer is leaves. Correct. So this is leaf. And since we have three here, we can say leaves. Leaves. For you to be able to know about your lesson for today's class, we are going to learn and watch the video. You can also take some notes while watching so that you can read your notes again and have a review. This one, let's play the video here.
Till now, we have discussed and learned the different types of asexual reproduction in plants. But is there any other method of reproduction adopted by plants? Yes, there is. We know that some plants are capable of sexual reproduction as well. Do plants possess any special features for this? Yes, they do. Plants possess flowers. Flowers are the reproductive structure of the plant. In a flower, the male sex organ is called the stamen and the female sex organ is called the pistil. But how does this process of sexual reproduction occur? Let's try and understand it. But before that, let's have a look at the typical structure of a flower. It appears somewhat like this. A flower has mainly two components. Now, what do we mean by this? Every flower is mainly composed of two parts. They are the essential and the non-essential parts. Do we know what these are? The parts of a flower, such as the stamen and the pistil, which are the reproductive parts, are the essential parts. Their function says it all. These are essential because they are directly involved in the process of reproduction. Do we mean that if these structures are not present, then a plant will not be able to reproduce? Yes, that's absolutely correct. So how will the plant be able to reproduce if the gamete-producing structures are not present? And what are the other parts then? Floral parts such as the petals and sepals are the next in our list, and they are the non-essential parts of a flower. These floral parts do not take part in the process of reproduction directly and are therefore called the non-essential parts. Now let's discuss each part in detail. To begin with, we have the stamen, which is the male part. What does the stamen look like? If we zoom in the structure, it looks like this. Stamen has two distinct parts, the anther and the filament. Do you think that these structures have specific functions to perform? Yes, as a matter of fact, they do. The part called the anther bears minute round bodies called pollen grains, which play an active role in reproduction. There is a specific process by which pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the female part of the same or different flower. Now, what is that part called? For that, we need to focus onto our next floral part, the pistil, which is the female part. The pistil has three distinct subparts. And what are these subparts? They are the stigma, style, and the ovary. Do these structures have specific functions? Yes, they do. The part called stigma is the landing place for the pollen. And what exactly do we mean by this? Pollen from the male part, the anther, land on the stigma and germinate further. This process is what we call pollination in plants. Next comes the style, which is a slender stalk that holds up the stigma in position and connects it with the ovary. What about the ovary then? It is the swollen basal part of the pistil which contains the ovules. But what are ovules and what is their function? Ovules are the female gametes that get fertilized and form the embryo. Is this process really so simple? Well, it's not as simple as it seems. The process is quite complicated. This was just an overview. Let us get into more details of the process of fertilization in the next video.
Alright, so there you go. So that is the video about fertilization. How does the seed from the plant became flower? Alright, so let's have the next part. So in order for pollination to take place effectively, there are certain things that must happen in a certain order. So let's try to have this one. So this is the process of how the pollination takes place. And when you say pollination, it is the process wherein the plants reproduce. So the first part is the pollen sacs ripen. So from the video, you know where is the pollen sac, and there we go. So they contain pollen grains, right? Then the anther bursts and the pollen is released. The pollen grains are then transferred to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same kind. So this is the landing portion, right? So the stigma, the anther will burst and the pollen grains will be transferred here. When a pollen grain falls on the stigma, it begins to sprout and produces a pollen tube. The pollen tube goes down through the style into the ovary. There, it enters into the ovary. There it enters an ovule where the male cell unites with the female cell, forming a new cell. This union of the male and female cell of a flower is known as the fertilization. So again, children, the union of the male and female cell of a flower is what we call fertilization. The new cell divides again and again until becomes an embryo. At the same time, the mother plant stores food in the ovule, forming cotyledon. The embryo and the stored food in the cotyledon are called the seed. Now, from the video that you have watched a while ago, this is how we transfer the pollen grains. So, from the anther, it will burst, going to the stigma of the pistil. So, when you say pistil, this is the female part of the flower, and this is the male part of the flower. So, for better understanding, again, when you say stamen, it means it is the male part of the flower. So, this is the anther. So, this is where the pollen grains are being stored. So, from there, this is this long green tube-like is called the filament. Now let's go to the female parts of the flower. So the female parts of the flower is called the pistil. So there are three parts. The stigma, this is where the pollen grains landed when the anther burst. We have the style and we have the ovary. Okay. let's do a quick wrap up of what you have learned for your class today. So, how do seeds develop from flowers? How do seeds develop from flowers? How do they develop from flowers? So, these are the steps. The first one, pollen sacs ripen, then the anther bursts and the pollen is released. Very nice. When a pollen grain falls onto the stigma, it begins to sprout and produces a pollen tube. The pollen tube grows down through the style into the ovary. There, it enters into the ovary, and there, it enters the ovule, where the male cell unites with the female cell. I hope you have learned something from our lesson. So let's now have a short test. Let's have this one. So choose the letter of the correct answer. So which part of the flower becomes the fruit that contains the seed? A. Anther. B. Ovary. C. Stigma. D. Style. Number 2. Which of the following form a seed? A. Anther. B. Petal. C. Style. D. Ovule. Again, you are just going to choose the letter of your answer. Just the letter. Next is number 3. The sperm cell and egg cells unite. This is the process wherein the egg cell and the sperm cell unite. So what process is it? A. Fertilization. B. Pollination. C. Ovulation. D. Formation. Number 4. A fertilized egg is also called A or an pollen, B. Ovule, C. Zygote, D. Bud. And for the last question, what happens to the other parts of a flower when the seed is developed? A. They become bigger. B. They wither and die. C. They sprout to form new plants. And D. They split into several parts. So let's have your answers. Okay, so there you go. So that's the end of your lesson for the class. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you again next time. Have a good day, everyone.